Calaroga Shark Media.
Hi there, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Out today on Hilarious. Now, don't forget, the Hilarious comedy brand is where you go when you're on your way down. We've got a lot of proof here. Sebastian Maniscalco's It Ain't Right. This is the trailer that radicalized me against Sebastian Maniscalco. Please stop making stupid faces. You can't see the faces on an audio podcast, but you can almost hear them. Let's listen. Some edits here.
I have a mild case of sleep apnea. This is where I'm at. I'm gonna duct tape my mouth shut so I don't pass away in my sleep. If someone came to rob my house, they would look at me and go, someone was already here, let's go. I went to a drugstore today. I took out cash. By the way, you take out cash nowadays like kryptonite. This kid was in his early 20s. He's like, what is that? I said, it's money. It's used for goods and services. Some people do Venmo. Maybe you went out to dinner, somebody paid, and then the rest of the group said, no, we'll Venmo you later. No, you pay me now.
Deadline asked Sebastian Maniscalco, are you able to enjoy your success? He said, I'm not Mr. Positivity. It's very fashionable nowadays on Instagram to be like, oh, I get up and I do my affirmations and I have a vision board. It's not really my style. My fear is failing. When I succeed, I feel like it's going to go away. It's hard to sustain success. There's an expectation like, you're putting out a Hulu special. This better be equal or better than the last one. It's a lot of pressure. Now, what we've learned from the Hulu specials is it's not going to be better than the last one. Name one Hulu special that was better than the artist's previous special. I'll wait. Actually, I can't wait because then there'll be dead air. You can email me on the side, or you can hit the Facebook group, Daily Comedy News Podcast Group. I'll push all my chips into the middle of the table here. In June of this year, BuzzFeed made a list of the hilarious specials. Jim Gaffigan's The Skinny, no way that's his best. Bill Burr's Drop Dead Years is his worst. And now Sebastian Maniscalco. Sebastian, were you born funny, or is it something you learned? He told Deadline, this is an innate ability. I don't think you can learn to be funny. I was funny around my family and friends, and I was funny when I had to give a book report in front of the class. I was an extremely shy kid. People think comedians are going to be the center of attention, or they think, oh, you must be great at parties. I'm really not. I'm itching to get out because I don't want to do the chit-chat. I was at a kids' museum over the weekend. I find myself uncomfortable talking to the parents there because I'm just not a chit-chat guy. Sebastian, do you regret making any past jokes? He said, I don't. Listen, you're going to offend people. You can't control it. I do a joke about my father putting antifreeze on bologna and killing raccoons in the garden. The people labeled him as some guy who's killing animals. He never did that. I actually heard the story from somebody else. I find it strange people take this stuff so seriously. About 85% of it is stories that have happened in my life, but there are stories that I've heard and taken bits and pieces from, or I've over-exaggerated things that might not have happened, but are rooted in truth. That reminds me, what was I watching? I was watching some comedy special the other night, and I felt like none of it was real, and I just couldn't last with it. I can't remember what it was. But yeah, I need my jokes grounded in something. I understand that the stories are comedy. I understand they're exaggerated for effect, but you got to have some semblance of reality in there. This is going to bother me now. Who was I watching? I actually had paused. I went in my Netflix app. It wasn't Netflix, so I think it was something on Amazon Prime. I think I switched while watching the Knicks recently and switched over there. So whatever they put in front of you on Amazon. Anyway, it wasn't good. Sebastian doing the full court press this week. He got an Us Weekly cover story where he's making a stupid face. Why? Why do you have to make a stupid face? You're a nice looking man. Just smile. You don't have to make a stupid face. Sebastian says, at the end of the day, I just want to make people laugh. He stays away from current events and politics because I've always thought whatever my father's doing is a hell of a lot funnier than what the president is doing. You're getting hit over the head with bad news and politics. When people go out for a night of entertainment, they want to escape. I'd rather talk about my experiences than what's happening with the current administration. Just doesn't sound fun. Hey, look, man, President Trump is just trying to make NBC 1230 great again. Is that not what we want? We had Letterman and Conan, and I don't know what Jimmy did there for 5 minutes, but this Seth Meyers. This is not the Letterman show we grew up with. What are you doing? Let's make NBC 1230 great again. I think the president's doing a great job on this issue. Sebastian tells us, I just wanted to do stand-up for a living. That was the goal. I never expected to be doing these big shows. I concentrated on being the best comedian I could possibly be, and everything after that was kind of gravy. Interesting premise from Cracked.com. They floated out there that there's no number one comedian right now. I think it's interesting. Is Dave Chappelle not the number one comedian right now? Let me know what you think. Daily Comedy News Podcast Group. By the way, some of you are getting the questions wrong. There are a couple questions there to make sure that you're not a porn bot. Most people get the one right about what do you seek, but you're getting the other ones wrong. I'll give you a hint. You've never seen Bob's Burgers. No one has. It's a hoax, okay? Cracked points out there are touring comics like Matt Rife and Nate Bargatze who have a tight grip on ticket sales and TikTok followers, but who haven't yet crossed over into TV and film. There are the folks like Stavros Halkias and Caleb Heron, who balance comedy podcasts with continued pushes into Hollywood. Plenty of comedians right now are finding success without being the number one anything. Crack says that's not a bad thing. As we've seen, once a comedian becomes ultra wealthy, they tend to make some pretty disappointing choices. Yeah, like a lot of them went to the Riyadh Comedy Festival and played there. Fortunately, YouTube videos can subvert the need to perform at the Riyadh Comedy Festival. The Wall Street Journal asked Louis C.K. about performing at the Riyadh Comedy Festival. Their question, though, did you do the same material that the reporter had recently saw? CK said, same set, I didn't really change anything. I had a really profound experience there. The night before my show, I went to a local comedy club called the Comedy Pod. This guy who runs it said there was no stand-up 4 years ago. Now they do like 12 shows a week, and it's never not packed. They went from 0 comedians to like 300 dedicating their lives to it. The Journal was curious what the material is. CK said most of the comics were in Arabic and a few in English. They were doing jokes about being married and how life is hard, like any other comedians, but without the swagger. There's a raspiness to American comedy that's kind of defensive and F everybody. I've traded in that, but they didn't have that. They were with their audience, and the crowds were excited. It felt like comedy in the 80s here. I saw a guy at the club who reminded me of a young Richard Pryor doing pantomime and stuff that was really funny. When I did the big 8,000-seat arena, I asked if he could do 5 minutes in Arabic so the audience could see their own comedians, but word came back from the powers above the festival. Absolutely not. He could work in English, but not in Arabic. Apparently, the interview just glossed over that because the rest of the quote is, then I asked for some Arabic pop as my walk-on song, and they said absolutely not. They picked Back in Black by AC/DC instead, and apparently we glossed over that too. The Journal's next printed question is, people assume a big paycheck was the real reason he went there. CK said, I can make the same money anywhere I made over there. Just might take 2 nights instead of 1, and going to the Saudi Arabian desert for 1 gig is a pain-in-the-neck way to make money. I had to be in Montreal the next night. I literally went from the stage to a plane to Montreal to the stage. I'm not going through that for a paycheck. Variety waxed Jim Gaffigan's car pretty well. We'll pick at this over the next few days. The topic here, politics. Jim, generally, you're not a political comedian, but last year you played Tim Walz on SNL, etc., etc. Jim said, I've always liked the fact that at my shows, a lesbian couple could sit down to a Mormon family and enjoy the stand-up I'm doing, but I do find politics fascinating. We live in an age where you can't really articulate anything without being misconstrued. My best friend from childhood was furious I did the Al Smith dinner. He said, I can't believe you didn't destroy Trump. And I'm like, I know it's not going to change anything, and the task was to attack both sides in a setting where you're surrounded by billionaires. The Tim Walz thing, I was within the environment of SNL, and there's a cultural interpretation of every sketch. I intellectually know this. No one's going to listen to me. At the same time, I want to be able to look my children in the eyes and say I didn't allow some horrible thing to happen. I also feel comfortable that people know my views, but I don't know if me being an advocate helps, like with the Mamdani thing. That ended up being very divisive. I remember seeing Stavi and all those guys supporting Mamdani, and I'm like, I don't know if that's helping him. Maybe I'm being naive. Variety said, you have guys like Andrew Schultz and Theo Vaughn interviewing politicians on their podcast. You say no one's listening to you, but maybe people are. Jim said, people are coming to a show to have a break from some of this drama. That's not to say there aren't great comedians who talk about social commentary. The spirit of George Carlin is very important. I remember when Trump was first elected, my opening act had some political jokes. During 2016 and 17, the audience would kind of look at the ceiling. The jokes were well constructed, and they weren't on one side or the other, but it was just too much. People are looking at a break from that. They're not ignoring the serious issues, but they're going, at least I can go see Jim Gaffigan and hear him complain about being a parent. That's not to say he doesn't care about someone being tackled on the streets. It just means maybe people want a break from that. Now, what's interesting is Jim said all that without promoting his bourbon, so that's something. Josh Johnson was on Trevor Noah's podcast. Trevor said, when I look at you, this is the perfect example. Like, if you tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this version of Josh Johnson, like the person we know you as today, you wouldn't exist the same if the internet wasn't what it was now. Josh said, I know exactly what you mean. And I think about that a lot because I had found some mainstream and like legacy media success, but not enough to live the way that I'm living or make the choices that I make. The pair talked about how the benchmarks in the industry have changed. Josh said, the ways in an industry could elevate a person along the way. I had a lot of that stuff, and then there was a gap in between. Does he have his own show? Is he writing a show? Is he selling shows? Is he a touring headline comedian? And so there was a gap there. The internet closed that gap. The people closed that gap.
Comedy stock market.
Thank you, Burt Reynolds. Now, I feel like comedy stock market can get kind of negative. And that's not the spirit of the show. I'm here to be positive. So, I'm not going to tell you to sell your Sebastian Maniscalco because he makes stupid faces. Don't do that. Let's be positive this week. Let's buy Josh Johnson. We just talked about him. A lot of good buzz on him. Bright career ahead. Let's load up on him. Let's buy Adam Sandler, the great dramatic actor. There's still nothing but good buzz on this Jay Kelly movie. Let's get in front of it and buy a little more Sandler. And last week, I told you to buy Kenan Thompson, right? That was just good vibes. And then he announced that sports thing with Kevin Hart I told you about earlier in the week. So if you bought some Thompson, you made a couple hypothetical bucks on the comedy stock market. Why don't we buy some more Kenan Thompson? And let's buy some comedy stock in President Trump. He's had a bit of a rough period with some of the things in the news, but when it comes to comedy, he's trying to make NBC 1230 great again, and I think we need to support the president as we try and get back to the good old days of Letterman and Conan-style comedy at 1230 and not what's going on now. So those are the recommendations. Buy Sandler, buy Josh, buy Kenan, buy Trump. That's your comedy stock market for this week. Jon Stewart did a panel at the 92Y. He was talking about management at Paramount Global and said, I don't know that you can feel the other humans in the room. Former Viacom chief executive Tom Freston agreed with Jon Stewart, said, we're drowning in data. You put up a show and executives have all this data saying you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. Stewart said to Freston, you seem to have a connection to the artist and artistry. The Silicon Valley ethos is more steeped in efficiency. They walk in and go, how many people work here? 8,000? Good. Make it 2. It's not really tied to the value. Freston said they didn't come to their jobs with a desire to do storytelling. Freston said, it looks like Warner Brothers is going to disappear and get gobbled up by Paramount. Stewart cut in and said, which is a fantastic company. I can't speak more highly of them. I think they should gobble up all of them and hand them directly to the president. Stewart joked, am I being fired? Talk show host is a very tenuous business right now. I don't know if there was a tweet that went out from the FCC right now. Freston said data brings in a cast of different kinds of characters to run the show, and the soulfulness that we felt and enjoyed has melted away a little bit. Last weekend during football, I was emailing back and forth with Paul, the listener. Hello, Paul. Thank you for listening. Paul was giving me the business a little going, basically paraphrasing here. Hey, about time you talk about Skankfest. And I was very defensive. And I was like, look, man, I've talked about Skankfest every year. And then I took a screenshot of my phone where I have Luis J. Gomez's phone number. I'm like, I know this guy a little bit. I'm not saying we're tight, but I know him. Apparently, I dropped Louis Gomez at some point last week, and he reminded me it's Louis J. Okay, we got that straightened up. Michael Ian Black has a Substack. Michael wrote under the headline, The A-Hole Who Said Yes. Mr. Black apparently really enjoyed Skankfest. He wrote, I find myself being skanky. I'd never heard of the festival before being invited to participate, and I was initially a little concerned about affiliating myself with skankiness, but F it, I know how to get gross. I think my response to the initial email was something like, I'd be an a-hole to say no. And so here I am, the a-hole who said yes. Michael Ian Black writes, from a comedian's perspective, one of the lovely things about comedy festivals is that many comics such as myself don't get much of an opportunity to hang out with other comedians. So when these things pop up, I like to go for no other reason to see folks I haven't hung out with in a while. Last night, for example, I got to catch up with fellow kid in the hall, Scott Thompson. Michael writes, yes, I'm joking when I say fellow kid in the hall. I make the joke because, as some of you know, the project for which I'm most often recognized is for being a member of the Kids in the Hall, a show I was never on. I also got to catch up with the great Doug Stanhope. Said hello to Rich Voss and Bonnie McFarlane. I met Shane Gillis, who's much taller than I would have thought. I always thought he had some strong 5'9" energy, so I was surprised to see him clocking in around 6'3". Black writes, with a name like Skankfest, the vibe is unsurprisingly somewhere between a comedy club midnight show and an insane clown posse concert. Skipping ahead, Michael Ian Black writes, there are so few shows that you get off the stage and feel like you did what you envisioned in your head. Years ago, I remember Chris Rock was talking about this. He said that a comic might have 2 shows a year in which they felt like they nailed it. 2. Chris is a much better comic than I'll ever be, so for me, that number's more like 1, maybe 1/2. Sounds like it was a good time at the Skankfest. Paul, thank you for listening. Normal episodes all weekend. Meet you back here in the morning.